Okay, it looks like today we've got a couple people attending, and it looks like 10 registered, but only a couple are out there. I have, is it James and Melissa, looks like.
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear about this from your online instructor or on-campus instructor?
Over the class email.
Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you what I've done so far is last week I covered the integument system so that actually this week I could go back over some of the previous material to prepare you. You guys have a midterm, it looks like, over, I want to say, chapters 1 through 6. And so I wanted to take the time to go over that material. What the other ones, the other sessions, I don't know if you guys have had the chance to look at them. They are supposedly, you can go to YouTube and get those as a source to look at later on. So the ones that are out there previously recorded are out there. Do either one of you have any specific questions about the material right now?
No.
Okay. Well, let's go over some things that might be helpful to you. One thing I want to show you is some study hints that may or may not, like I said, be something that you're doing that may help out getting ready for the midterm or just getting ready for any test. I know that you probably took it online for a purpose, you know, that you needed to be at home for some reason, or a work schedule or whatever. But if you're having some difficulty, you might see if there's some students in your area that might want to get together and form a study group. One other thing you can do is actually contact the closest Ivy Tech campus and see if there's any tutors for anatomy and physiology on campus. And those tutors should be free for you. If you go out to get a tutor somewhere else, you're a good science tutor, you're talking anywhere from $20 to $25 an hour. But at the Ivy Tech campuses, hopefully they have a tutoring center. I know we do here in Terre Haute, and we've got some students that are available there to help review material with students. If you're not close to an Ivy Tech, you could possibly contact your closest high school and either have a high school teacher tutor you, or one of their upperclassmen, juniors or seniors, tutor you that may have already had the course. Now that person you'll have to pay, but that may be something else to think about. And then what I always tell my students, whether it's on campus or on online, that you may have to change your study habits. You know, when some students say, well, this is what I do, I study 6 hours before the exam straight and I still don't do well. Well, then that's not the study method for you. Maybe you need to break it up and study a little bit, you know, for 6 nights before it or whatever. I've got people that are flashcard people, and so they'll put all this vocabulary and they'll have these huge stacks of flashcards and or note cards for flashcards, and I'll say, you know, do you know some of those? And they look at me and go, well, yeah, I know some of them. Well, then pull them out of the deck, because when you reduce the size of that stack, that visual is also a good helpful accomplishment that you'll feel, and then you can just focus on the ones that you are, you know, having trouble with. So, you know, you got to think outside the box, come up with some different ways to study. If you've studied alone and it doesn't help, then you need to have maybe have a spouse or a brother or sister, somebody that can quiz you and ask you some questions. If it's the area that you're studying in, maybe you've got small children running around that somebody needs to take them for a while, or maybe you need to go somewhere for a while, coffee shop, local library, somewhere that's quiet. Maybe you need to turn off different types of media. If you're trying to study and you keep getting text messages from somebody that you have to respond to, or the TV's on, or, you know, whatever that background noise might be, you need to try some different things for that. So, like I said, give those a try. I mean, what's it going to hurt? Here are some good websites, 3 good websites. Have you guys tried Khan's Academy for anything?
I haven't, no.
Okay, it's pretty good. I mean, I don't get paid for telling people about it. It's just a pretty good site. And you go through YouTube. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. All I did on this, I went to YouTube and I just typed in Anatomy and Physiology Khan's Academy. And this is everything that pulled up. Parts of a cell. Okay, that's in your first 8 weeks. Endocrine system. If you go into 102, there's a video about endocrine system. Flow of blood through the heart, nervous system, muscle cell. Here's biology and anatomy and physiology. He's going to talk about the backgrounds of it. But my point is, it's pretty good tutorials. He talks at a level that you can understand, but he also gets all the topics put in proper order. So if we went to, let me put one in here and see what we come up with. Which, if you notice here, he has a lot of videos in different types of subject matter, and I have a lot of nursing students who not only use him for anatomy and physiology, but they use him for their math class as well. So if you're struggling in math that you need to have for nursing, this is also a good place to go on YouTube. But if I put Khan's Academy, and if I put, integument system, let's just see what he's got for that. And we'll see if he's got one for that. And right here, he's got one. It's called Meet the Skin. And this one's just been done 7 months ago. Some of these are a little bit older. But, and it even tells you, like down here, how long it'll take. This one's a little over 5 minutes. This one's going into more of the epidermis, which is pretty good review because you're going to need to know those different stratums and layers. And let me start this and show a little bit of it, then I'm going to stop to show you the ease of how he does his plans. Okay, so he's going to go through that step by step, and already you can see he's breaking it into the epidermis, dermis, and the subcutaneous or the hypodermis. But then he's going to start drawing and looking at the different strata of the epidermis and the types of cells that you're going to find in each. So he's pretty thorough. So Khan's Academy is a good one to look at. Have you tried Quizlet before?
I think I have.
Okay. I see Victoria's joined us too. Quizlet's pretty good. A lot of people go there specifically for just their flashcards, but they don't realize there's other activities that you can get into there. Let me see if I can get that pulled up. I don't know if I had one ready to go. I don't think I did. And what you can do with Quizlet is you can just put in what type or topic you want, and they've already got flashcards and things ready for you to use. And it's free, which is good. And if I type in, let's just type in integument again, and I do a search, here it comes up with this huge list of flashcards that people have done. Let's see if I can get this to move over. If you see somebody put one in there May 9th, 2014, and then another list in there December 3rd, 2014. So this person has a whole 13 terms. If you scroll on it over here to the right, it'll give you some basics of those terms. But then, like I said, if you go up here towards the top, and click on, let's just click on this first one. I haven't looked at these terms. Here's the flashcards, for example, but also they have the terms right here next to the side in question form. Okay, so if we do flashcards, it should come up then in a flashcard form. So a major function of integument system, because we're talking about anatomy and physiology, so we need to know the function. And what you do is you click to flip it, and then it gives you the most important functions of the integument system. Then when you're ready to go on to the next one, you just tab it over. What's integument made of? Flip it, skin, hair, nails, and you just keep going like that. Like I said, though, there's more than one list on there, so maybe that's something that you want to look into. You can actually do a basic test and then actually score yourself to see how you did with those. You can also, let's see, I think there was a, yeah, if you just like a blank fill-in that you can do. There's also a scatter test. Let's see if I can get the scatter to pull up. So it says make everything disappear. So then what you have to do is you have to click and drag the term with the definition or answer. And you can race against other people as far as that goes. And then there's another race that literally is where you're supposed to match them up before they get to the end, come up with the answers. So Quizlet has a lot of different things that you can do. So if you guys haven't tried that, give Quizlet a try, okay? Then also I put on here web anatomy. I'm not sure if any of you have seen web anatomy before. And I think I had that one pulled up. Here it is. This is called web anatomy, and I've got that. I'm going to have these websites in this recording so you can look at it later. But if you go down here to, let's say what? Histology. Because I'm pretty sure you're going to have to look at some slides and tell what type of slides of tissue they are. And for example, this says histology 1, short and medium and long. Well, short just means that you get a few choices compared to a lot of choices. So in this one, for example, you've got 10 different slides with 10 different things histology slides labeled on them. And what you end up doing for practice is you go over here with the down arrow and you're given a choice of what these might be. So if I randomly, I'm just going to randomly pick some stuff so I can show you how to do this. And you just go through and you pick out whatever answers you think belong to those pictures. And then you can do an immediate scoring to see how you do, and also to see what you need to study. You know how I talked about weeding out the stack of flashcards? This will help you weed out what you need to study. So I just put a whole bunch of random answers in there. I didn't even look at the pictures. Then you come down at the bottom of it, score test, and then when you come back up on the right-hand side, it tells you the correct answers. And on the left-hand side, it shows you what you got wrong. Okay? And so this was called a short list because I only had 10 answers for 10 slides, and that was it. But if you want to challenge yourself a little more, you take a medium list, and they're going to give you more choices. And that kind of helps you figure out how much you need to study. But this is called web anatomy. Now, what's nice about web anatomy, here's looking just at epithelial tissue. You know, you got your 4 types of tissue: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve. And it also has connective tissue on here. Okay? And that connective tissue, you got to remember, that's the one that has the widest variety of functions. You know, you're talking about blood, you're talking about bone, you're talking about fat adipose tissue. Then down here you even have some questions that are not pictures. Okay? Those are just true and false. And you can check those answers right away. Here, excuse me, here again, kind of like Khan's Academy and the Quizlet, you can use this not only for 101. When you get into 102, you can use these again in 102. And like here's the integument system. It's not too much in that one, but it's actually labeling, and I bet $1 somewhere you're going to have to tell or label pictures on your midterm about the skin. So here again, there's some choices. You put the correct answers in, and then you check your answer. Okay? And you can clear it and just keep practicing it again and again and again. And then, just trying to think of one more that you guys might. When you get into the first chapter after the midterm, the skeleton, this is going to be a good site to go to as far as that goes. The cell terms are in here as well. You have a whole chapter about that. So you need to know the parts of the cells, the organelles, and what their functions are. So this is a good site for that as well. Okay? So there's 3 places that you can go to and take a look at. And like I said, it'll be on here for you to follow later on and practice. One other place which is good that I didn't have on there, I'm not sure if I've got it, it's Genetics Utah. One thing that it kind of does is put the size of a cell. You know, we talk about the hierarchy going from an atom to a molecule to cell, tissue, and so forth. This puts us in perspective as far as our cell size. So it starts off here with something the size of the coffee bean and rice and sesame seed, and it's got units of millimeters, which tells you that, you know, that's not too big. But then as you move this bar here at the bottom over to the right, it starts to zoom in a little closer. Now we're looking at a sesame seed, grain of salt. Then we get some one-celled organisms, some amoebas, paramecium, and also the units change. They're smaller, so that's a micrometer, 10 to the -3rd. There's a human egg right next to a sperm. Shows you the massiveness of the egg compared to the sperm. Here's skin cells. We talk about skin cells being broad and flat because they're there to protect us and cover. Here's a rod from the eye. Red blood cells. Then we get into smaller things. Yeast, which is considered a microbe. Here's a chromosome, X chromosome. And mitochondria. Mitochondria are the organelles in your cells and mine that are what we call the powerhouse of the cells, because that's where we end up getting some ATP production. Lysosome, just think of Lysol. They're there to break down things. But it keeps on going and going and puts these parts in perspective. Here's looking at viruses. You know, full viruses are even smaller than some of the organelles that you have. And so now we're looking at nanometers, 10 to the -9th. There's hepatitis. Excuse me, there's a ribosome. Ribosomes are important for protein synthesis. Here's hemoglobin, transfer RNA, also important with that ribosome to make some protein. Antibodies, phospholipids, you've got those in your cell membranes. Down to the point of glucose, PM means picometer, even smaller yet. Methionine is one of our amino acids, water molecule, then a carbon atom. So this is a pretty good site. It's called Genetics Utah. That puts the size of a cell in perspective. Another good thing about this site is it actually looks at a cell inside a cell. And so whatever you scroll over and take a look at, he'll come up and say the term that goes with it, or it'll light up. You can also make the cell membrane transparent. So different structures that are going to be looked at as far as animal cells go. Okay? Anybody have any questions so far?
Mm-hmm. I need to know these sites.
You need to know what?
The address of these sites.
This site,
Mm-hmm.
it is called Learn Genetics Utah. Let me copy and paste it so you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna copy and paste this.
Okay. Just a second, please. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Learn Genetics Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'll keep it in. I'll keep it in this recording so you can get back to it later on.
Mm-hmm.
That's
oh yeah, thank you.
but that'll be a good site to go to, parts of the cell. And that's another site that's going to be good when you guys get into 102, because it has a lot of different things that go along with the nervous system, you know, about how cells communicate, receptors and things like that. This is also looking into the membranes around things like the mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, stuff like that. Here's a good look at your cell membranes, and that's one thing that you're going to be talking about, the head and the tail of it, which parts of what we call hydrophobic versus hydrophilic. So, you know, we've got the tail part that is hydrophobic and the head part that's hydrophilic, so that helps with transport. But those are all on that same site. Okay, so you've got that to look at later on. All right, any other questions so far? Okay, let's take a look. I tried to pull up some of these PowerPoints that you had. This one I didn't do much with because we started this later in the semester, but this is out of your Chapter 1, and so one thing that you'll need to do is make sure that you definitely know the definition of what anatomy is and what physiology is. So anatomy, like it says, it's looking at the structure. Physiology is looking at the jobs or the functions that are going on. And this part down here where it says complementarity of structure and function, just think of a nerve cell. A nerve cell transmits nerve impulses really fast. You know, that's the function of it, physiology. The anatomical part of it is it's got these long drawn-out axons like wires, and so it's going to transport electricity, electrical impulses really fast. So the shape of that cell goes along with the function of that cell. You think about skin cells, for example. Skin cells are broad and flat, and they're broad and flat because they cover us to protect us. So that's what it means by complementarity of structure and function. I would know this hierarchy. I call this hierarchy, going from simple to more complex. You know, atom, molecule, macromolecule, organelle, cell, tissue, organ system, and so forth. And I would know what falls into each category. And there's a visual picture of that as well, going from something like a proton all the way up to a human like ourselves. These are characteristics of life, you know, what we do to survive, basically. The change in position, you know, responsiveness, like it says. If we get near a hot stove, we know to move away from it. When we talk about growth, we're talking about overall body size. Reproduction. Reproduction can be two things. Reproduction can be having new child, new infant, new people. Or reproduction could be something like your skin cells going through mitosis to replace the ones that have sloughed off. Respiration, obviously, we need oxygen, and we need to get rid of some toxic things like carbon dioxide. And then digestion, we need that in order to break down our food so that we can get that ATP that we need from it. Here's some more absorption. We need to get, especially like with our small intestines, we need to get our nutrients from that. We need to get it through the walls. Circulation, moving those fluids through the body, whether it's blood or lymph fluid. Assimilation, now we're going to take this material that we absorbed and use it in different places differently. Excretion then, you know, especially with our urinary system, get rid of waste that we don't need. And here, a lot of times, that'll depend on our particular diet, on what we keep and what we get rid of. Here's what you got to have in order to live: water, food, oxygen, heat, pressure. I mean, those are things that are just part of it. The water, we talk about it being the most important thing. You can live a long time without food, but you have to have that water. Water is a good transport mechanism for us. It helps keep our body temperature the way it needs to be, but it's a major player as far as getting those reactions to take place. Food then, that's where we're going to get our nutrients from, our energies from, you know, to make energy, that type of thing. Oxygen, obviously we need that to inhale and release our carbon dioxide. Heat, heat's going to be important to get those chemical reactions taking place. You know, when they're talking about metabolic reactions, they're talking about all the chemical reactions that take place 24 hours a day in our body. And then pressure, we've got to be able to have atmospheric pressure in order to inhale and exhale. We've got pressure in our vessels from water. We have osmotic pressure from solutes in our fluids. So pressure is a big part of how we handle things. One of our major parts of our body is we want to be in homeostasis. We want things to be normal, maintained like they should. So we have ways and built-in mechanisms to help keep us under control. Let's say, for example, our pH levels get outside of the range. We've got built-in mechanisms to help bring us back in. So homeostasis is important. Anybody got any questions on any of that so far?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yes?
No.
Okay. Trying to just pick out some other things. Make sure you know a positive and negative feedback mechanism. Like it says, negative, you know, it tries to keep things from getting out of control. So if your blood sugar gets too high, for example, your body has mechanisms to help build it in to bring it back under control. And once it gets under control, then we stop that. Okay. If it's a positive feedback, a good example of that is delivering a child. You start going through labor and you've got contractions taking place. Your body's going to amplify that until the job's done. Okay. Not as long-term as some of those negative feedbacks are. Make sure you know different types of layers, membranes, cavities, you know, the basic structures of the human body. Here's looking at different types of membranes that are there to help with support and separation. Know the organ systems. Now, here's the thing, and I tell my on-campus this as well. It kind of goes back to the stack of flashcards that you guys will keep going through all of them all the time. As you go through these organ systems, if there's some that you're not going to forget, don't worry about those. Worry about the ones that seem to be harder to remember. Now, as I flip through these, the ones that tend to be ones that people forget would actually be that integument system offhand. A lot of people remember skeletal, muscular, nervous, digestion, and respiratory. You think of the major things that you do as far as eating, breathing, that type of thing. So integument system may be one that you need to know. Endocrine is one that people tend to forget. That's the one when we talk about different types of glands throughout the body. Lymphatic is another one that people tend to forget when we talk about lymph nodes and vessels and things like that. Digestion, respiratory, they're okay. Urinary tends to be forgotten. I'm not sure why, because part of that, I would say, would come along with the digestive. And then we have the male and female reproductive system. Now, not only should you remember the systems, you should remember major organs that are in there. When you talk about cardiovascular, you know, people talk about, okay, well, cardiovascular is blood and heart, but it's also blood vessels. So it's three areas: the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood itself. Okay. For some reason, people want to put respiratory in there, and it's not considered part of that. So I'm not saying they don't work together, but there are different systems. So focus on the ones that you have trouble with. Okay. Anatomical position. We talk about the feet being about shoulder width apart, the palms facing forward with the thumbs out laterally to the side. When you stand up and do that, that's kind of an awkward stance, but that's still considered the anatomical position. Then here is some terminology, and a lot of this that you're going to have on your midterm is going to be basic vocabulary. So you've got some other resources through your textbook and online through Blackboard that you should have a study area or a study skills area that you can go in and do some practice there, plus use the ideas that I gave you today. So these are just terms that you're going to have to start memorizing if you don't already know some of them. Same thing with the planes of the body. Make sure you know those. Abdominal subdivisions, when we talk about the 9 regions. A lot of times when physicians or nurses are in an office, they'll refer to those areas. Plus, you should know what types of organs are in those areas. You know, if I'm talking about epigastric, you know, you shouldn't say, well, that must be where my bladder's at. No, your bladder's not way up that high. So I would know what organs are in there. Then I would be prepared to label or come up with some answers on some of these body regions. Here again, the ones that you already know, don't go back over and over again. Go to the ones that you're having trouble with. Okay? All right. Any questions on Chapter 1?
Well, I've found that the terminology has been a big problem for me because it's like there's 3 different words that mean the exact same thing.
Yeah, I do have students that have conflict with that, especially when you're talking about like superficial and deep.
Right.
Yeah. The only thing I could tell you is maybe, I don't remember how your setup of your midterm is, if it's multiple choice or I don't remember off the top of my head. But my point is, you know, hopefully you can get it to the point where those aren't on there. So like a couple of terms that come to mind like you're talking about, superficial and deep versus superior and inferior.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I tell people to think about superficial versus deep is, you know, superficial, your skin, deep is the muscle underneath your skin. When I talk about superior and inferior, I talk about more, how do I say it, like top to bottom. I'll say something like your brain is superior to your stomach. It's way above it. So that's the only thing I can think of to tell you that hopefully if it is a multiple choice situation, they won't have any of those similarities to it there. They'll have something that won't even make sense to be in that group. Here again, though, another good thing is to do those Quizlet flashcards with those terms, or even the, I can't remember if it's called Study Skills in your area, that they've also got some good cards with those as well. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. What else can I help somebody with? Any questions on Chapter 1? All right, I'm trying to remember. I tried to pull these up so I could look at them real quick. What was Chapter 2? Oh, Chapter 2. Do any of you have difficulty with the chemistry part?
I did at first because I feel like basically, I mean, by doing this online, we're kind of teaching ourselves.
Yeah, you are. It's all on you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I did at first, but then I spoke to a friend of mine that went through it, so that helped me understand.
Good. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning. I don't know if you were around when I was talking about, like, studying. I mean, I know you took it online for some reason that you couldn't come to campus, but if you can get, like you did, a friend that's been through it or a person that's doing, like, even Chem 101, that'll get you through this chemistry part. And it doesn't go real deep, but it goes just enough, I think, sometimes to cause some confusion. So definitely know parts of a cell, you know, the proton, the neutron, the electron, know their charges. These, like I said, I've got these already out there somewhere. I'm not sure, like I think they put them on YouTube, that you guys can find these as well. And I mean, I've already taped them, so Lord knows what I've said or what I haven't said. But you can go back through these again. But I'm trying to flip through here and see if there be any major. You need to know about bonds. You know, it's all about the electrons making these formations of molecules and compounds. So I would know about bonding, ionic bonds and covalent bonds. I don't know if they'll give you a picture of a periodic table where you'll have to tell the basics of what the numbers represent. So when you look at a periodic table, I don't know how well I can get this to draw. Let me do this other way. Hang on a second. When you get a periodic table, for example, if I look at, let's look at sodium because we talk about sodium all the time. And with sodium, excuse this nice scrawling without a pen. If you've got two numbers, All right, so here's my example. I've got 11 over 23 on sodium. You need to know, for example, that the top number is the atomic number, that one right there, the smaller of the two. It depends on what periodic table you look at. They might even have them switched. But they'll have an atomic number that tells you what element it is, and it also tells you the number of protons. The bigger of the two numbers, and in this case it's on the bottom, that's the mass number, and that tells you the number of protons and the number of neutrons. So it tells you what's in the nucleus. Then you got to figure out what is the electrons. Well, if I've got 23 as the mass and I've got 11 protons, that must mean I've got 12 neutrons. That gives you the 23. So this is neutrons, this is protons. And then this is also going to equal the number of electrons the protons are, the atomic number. If your element is neutral, these are going to equal each other. Okay? So I would imagine you're going to be asked something about that since they went through it in the chapter. Anybody got any questions on that? Okay. Chemical reactions, trying to think. Know the types of reactions. Like if they show you one, hopefully you can tell them whether it's a synthesis, decomposition, or an exchange. Now, just think of the term synthesis. When something's synthesized, it's made. So think of going from something simple to something more complex. Decomposition, when things break down, they decompose. So now think of the opposite of synthesis. It's going from complex to something simpler. So you could have a compound that breaks down into some smaller elements, that type of thing. Exchange, just what it talks about. You've got, everybody's like swapping ions there. So those examples are in there as well. Acids and bases. When you guys get to acids and bases, if you're in nursing or, well, even anatomy physiology, you're going to talk about the pH range of blood, which is 7.35 to 7.4. But the whole pH scale goes from 0 to 14, okay? And we've got to remember that. And the pH scale is based on how much hydrogen you have, hydrogen ions. So the more you have, the more acidic you are, and it heads towards this 0. The base, more hydroxyl, it goes towards this way. So the biggest confusion that people tend to have is they want to say, okay, the pH range is only 7.35 to 7.45. No, that's where you want your blood pH to be at. A pH scale goes clear from 0 to 14. Okay? Questions on any of that, guys?
No.
Okay. There's the blood pH. Another thing that we get into in this chapter is looking at inorganic things. Inorganic means it doesn't have carbon or doesn't have carbon as its backbone. Organic means more of those that do have carbon as their main backbone element. So that's when we talk about the biomolecules or the macromolecules that we need, like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. So this goes through all of that as well. You need to know, how are lipids and proteins different from carbohydrates? How are they alike? All of them have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They've got different uses. When we talk about carbs, we talk about that being a energy source we burn up pretty quick, but lipids are more of a energy source than carbs are, but we tend to store them, use them later. Proteins, hopefully we know by now, are made of amino acids, and out of this groups of proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbs, proteins have the widest variety of jobs and functions. They are like everywhere, and they do a lot of things for us. Nucleic acids include DNA, RNA, and ATP as well. Okay. What else? Let's see. What was chapter? Oh, chapter 3. I'll show you how to make, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but another technique, study tool. Let me grab my scissors. Chapter 3 is about the cell, and so you definitely need to know those parts of the cells, the organelles. So what you can do is you could take a piece of paper and fold it lengthwise, hot dog style, my kids told me. You can cut some flaps on the top. And let's say, for example, you put, let's put mitochondria, and then you can put, let's put ribosome, so that you have it on the front flaps. And on the inside, you could put a basic definition, like I'll put powerhouse of cell, ATP for mitochondria. And for ribosome, I'll put protein synthesis. Now, what you can do is you can put the parts of the cells on there, put that in there, and that's, instead of flashcards, you can carry around a piece of paper instead. And if you've got to wait for somebody to get done with some kind of practice or something like that, if you're waiting in line for something, you got this, which is a lot smaller to take around than your book, okay? So that might be some way to put some of your vocabulary, and just take it with you like that. So know parts of the cell. When we get to the, we go through hierarchy and we talk about parts of an atom and a molecule. When you get to the term cell, that cell, now we're talking about something living. So make sure you get that as far as the hierarchy goes. There's going to be questions, I know, and you know, about that cell membrane, plasma membrane. So make sure you know its function, but also what you're going to find in it. Like here's an example of a picture. This is outside the cell, this is inside the cell. That phospholipid bilayer, the heads and the tails of it. The tails are hydrophobic, the heads are hydrophilic. You talk about different proteins, that they can be completely inside or outside of the plasma membrane. They can be all the way through it, what we call integral. They can be stuck just in one side or the other. Plus, all these receptor sites with these proteins, these things that you see coming off are usually chains of glucose or some kind of carbohydrate. But a lot of these are here to let other things know to come by there and stop. They're kind of receptors, if you will. So there's a lot going on as far as the plasma membrane. Plus, you'll see these little ring-like structures throughout on this picture. That is the cholesterol, part of the lipid group, the steroids. We worry about getting high cholesterol, but we've got to have cholesterol available for us. We need that in our cell membranes. Okay? There's the rest of this is going to go through those parts of the cell. Also, it talks about transport, how we get things from inside versus outside. So make sure you know the difference between active and passive transport. Passive, you don't have to have additional ATP for it to move, but active you do. And I just tell people that, I use the hill as an example. If you run down the hill, you don't need anybody to shove you down the hill. You can make it down without any extra help. But if somebody says, hey, run up this steep hill, then you might need some help up it. So think of running up the hill as active and going down the hill as passive. And then they've got different types of each of those. So active, for example, endocytosis, exocytosis, bringing things into the cell, taking them out. You're going to need some more energy for that. Know the terms isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic, and this one has a good picture of the blood cells and what happens when you put them in those different types of solution. They talk about don't drink salt water because it dehydrates your cells, because the water inside your red blood cell wants to come out of it. And when it does that, it causes it to crenate or shrivel up. There's active transport. Those transports, there's good tutorials online for those as well. Make sure you know what mitosis is. When we talk about mitosis and then later on about meiosis, that's cell division of the nucleus. So mitosis is about body cells, somatic cells. Meiosis is about gametes, sex cells. So you have a section in Chapter 3 all about the cell cycle, and mitosis is a big part of that. You've also got interphase and cytokinesis. Interphase is just getting the cell ready to divide. Cytokinesis is finishing off the job after mitosis, getting one cell into two. So here again, you can do some tutorials as far as that goes. All right, any questions about that?
Mm-mm.
All right. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 might be the toughest chapter for people. The reason I say that, it has some equations in here that seem a little involved, but I would just know some basics and some vocabulary. When we talk about anabolism, or you hear somebody talk about anabolic steroids, they take those to build up body mass. So when you hear the term anabolism, think of putting smaller molecules together to make bigger ones. And then,
Something happened. My picture doesn't change.
do what now?
The same picture, pH scale measures and doesn't change.
What you're seeing, it hasn't changed?
I can see just this old picture. You put pH scale measures and...
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see your screen, just the same picture
It's
you
not,
put 5 minutes ago, and yeah, didn't change.
Is it changing now?
Now,
I don't know why. Is your computer locked up?
no, I don't think so.
Because I can change it here.
No. Okay. I'll look what I can do. I'll ask my husband if my computer logs or what.
No, it's not lagging. She's moving fine. The pH scale is a slide. That's up.
Yeah, we're on another chapter, so...
I can see you, but I can't see picture changing.
Huh. Well, let me shut the screen off, and then let me bring it back on. Did that do anything for you?
No, the same.
Huh. I don't know.
Ask different girls, their students.
James, can you see metabolism on your screen? I don't know. I don't hear anybody else's. Victoria, can you see it?
No.
I don't know. Well, this is out of the next chapter, but yeah, I'm not sure why you can't see that. Let me go back out here. Let's see. Because we're in chapter 4. Let's see if I can get this to try it again. And you still see the pH scale, or?
Yeah. pH scale.
I don't have any idea because I've got it out as well, so I don't know, hon. Because now, like I said, I've got it in chapter 4. Well, you can go, like I said, you can go out and get these off of through YouTube. I was just going to tell you that this is a good one, chapter 4, to go to that Khan's Academy, because you're going to look up cellular respiration. That seems to be difficult for some people. So make a note somehow to go to YouTube or whatever and go through the 3 basic parts of cellular respiration: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain. That's something that you need to have an understanding of. You don't need to know every single compound listed, but I would know the basics of each. You know, if it's glycolysis, it's splitting glucose. You need to know whether it's going to be aerobic or anaerobic. Aerobic means it needs oxygen, and it'll go through all three steps. If it's anaerobic, now we're talking about fermentation, like lactic acid fermentation. So take a closer look at those if you can. And I put in that one, if you get out to that, there is a good YouTube video on cellular respiration, and the link is in the PowerPoint. Let's see. Then DNA is talked about towards the end of Chapter 4. It's getting you ready to look at protein synthesis. So it's going to look at a DNA molecule. We talk about it being a twisted ladder, helical ladder. We talk about 4 bases, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. We talk about the sides of the ladder being sugars and phosphates alternating. And then the rungs of the ladder, we have adenine and thymine pairing up, and cytosine and guanine. And then the chapter will talk about replication, making copies of DNA from part of a DNA. Then we compare it to RNA. RNA is a single strand, DNA is a double strand. They have a different sugar, ribose versus deoxyribose. They still have adenine, guanine, and cytosine, but the uracil takes the place of thymine. And instead of replication, now we have what we call transcription and translation. We have 3 different types of RNA. Do you remember what the 3 different types of RNA are? We talk about ribosomal RNA, transfer RNA, and messenger RNA. So then making protein from that, we have DNA makes some RNA in the nucleus, and the messenger RNA goes out to a ribosome where ribosomal RNA is at with the code, a message, and then transfer RNA is out in the cytoplasm. They're going to bring some amino acids in to go along with these triplet codons, these 3 bases that are together, till we get to the point of making a protein. We've got 20 amino acids that we have all these different combinations of to make our protein from. Are you still seeing the pH scale? Chapter 5 gets into tissues. Make sure you do some looking at a bunch of histology slides. Another good place to go for looking at different types of tissue slides, if you go to Google Images and click on that, Google Images will allow you to look up a lot of different types of histology slides. You could just type in connective tissue under the image part of Google, and a whole bunch of those will come up. So when we talk about our different types of tissue, don't forget there's 4 basic types: the epithelial, the connective tissue, nerve tissue, and also muscle tissue. Know their functions and where you're going to find them at. That's going to be important. When we talk about epithelial tissue, remember how they're going to be named. They're going to be named if they're simple or stratified, 1 layer or multiple. They're also going to be named by the shapes that you see. Squamous, you know, we talk about them being broad and flat like your skin. Cuboidal, cube shape. Columnar, which means they're taller than they are wide. And then pseudostratified, that they kind of give you like a fake layering effect because the nuclei aren't in the same places. And so then here's some stratified multiple layers. Then connective tissue, that's the one that I said, you know, you get the widest variety of different types because you're talking about anything from blood cells to fat tissue. Like here's a good picture of some adipose tissue. You talk about those that are considered loose versus dense, packed close together or farther apart. Here's some specialized ones. Well, this is a nice one of bones, which kind of gives you that tree ring structure. Here's the one that is red blood cells, and these little bluish purple structures are white blood cells. And here's one that has some chondrocytes, cartilage. Chondro means cartilage. There's 3 others with cartilage in them. Membranes. Muscle. No, there's 3 different types of muscle tissue, and how we tell differences between them. If you're asked about them, we talk about smooth being non or not striated, which means the protein bands are not as dark in there and you don't see them like you do striations in cardiac and skeletal. You also consider whether they're involuntary or voluntary. It means do you have to think about it or not. So hopefully you don't have to think about your heart beating, so we call that involuntary. Same thing with smooth muscle is considered involuntary, like when you swallow and have food go down your throat, you don't have to think about that as it moves down. So there's some pictures of, this is considered smooth, you don't see the striations. This is cardiac. Here are these little lines here are called intercalated discs that help those cells overlay to form some tissue. And this one down here is your skeletal muscle. And then the darker structures that you see, you can see the nuclei throughout those. Nerve tissue, well, that's neurons, just another name for nerve cell. Here's a picture of a nerve cell. There's the cell body. Here's the axon that, remember I talked about at the very beginning, the shape and the function. Long and drawn out, electrical impulse, nerve impulse travels out. Dendrites, this means this is going to have some incoming information through here. So nerve cell is sending out information either to another nerve cell or to a muscle tissue. And then this picture up here is showing you all these specialized cells that are there to help support cells, nerve cells, to help them with their growth and to protect them. So microglia, astrocytes, those are different types of things that are going to be helpful with those. Then, let's see, that we've already looked at. Integument, I talked about that briefly. Now you're looking at hair, skin, nails. Know the basic functions. Know those layers. Here again on Google Images, you can get some of these to practice labeling for. You can go back to that web anatomy that I talked about and take a look at it. The epidermis, although there's 5 specific layers in there, when you compare it to the dermis is a lot thicker, and there's a lot more going on, it seems like, within that dermis. And then the subcutaneous, or the hypodermis, that's where you got a lot of insulation in it. This chapter is also going to talk about glands and how they help us figure out and regulate our body temperature. Plus, towards the end, they're going to talk about first, second, and third degree burns. You know, as you go from one up to the next level, they get worse for skin tissue. First degree burns, basically epidermis. You get to that second degree, you're now down into dermis. Third degree, you're all the way to muscle tissue. Okay? Now, that was just a quick overview, and that was the first time some of you have been here for this. So, do you have any other questions at this time that I can answer for you?
No.
Okay. Well, take the time to... Do somebody have a question?
No, I'm good. I left and joined again, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, this will be saved and uploaded for what we talked about today that has all of these sites on it. If you didn't get them jotted down, you can actually get to this later on and take a closer look at it because this recording will be posted. I won't be on here next week because I think that must be when you have your midterm next week, I would assume.
Yeah.
Kind of looking at the schedule, I think you'll be ready for that midterm next week. And then after the midterm, then I'll come back and start on the skeletal system. And we'll take a look at that. And we can actually go through some of the web anatomy or even Cons Academy, things like that. All right. Well, I wish you good luck on your midterm, and hopefully I'll see you the next time, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.